Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have Dr. Troy Hall with me today. How are you, Dr. Troy?
I am doing great, and if I were any better, I'd be you.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm going to read your short bio so people kind of know who you are. Dr. Troy is recognized as the International Association of Top Professionals Talent Retention Expert of the Year, named as one of the top 20 business leaders by Valiant CEO Magazine, a Brainz Global 500 Award recipient, and featured on the Today Show, ABC Global TV network, Beyond the Business Radio Show, and CEO World. Dr. Troy Hall is an award winning talent retention consultant, international speaker, and author of multiple best selling books. Dr. Troy is distinguished as an international development educator and recipient of the South Carolina State House Resolution for his Global Leadership Exchange Program, an international mentoring program. As the founder of Cohesion Culture, Dr. Troy has dedicated his career to establishing a cycle of culture wellness in the corporate and professional sphere. His consulting and executive coaching engagements are built on the strategic framework of cohesion culture, making the concepts of belonging, value, and shared commitment easy for organizations to adopt and implement. How did you have time to do all of that stuff, Dr. Troy?
I'm not really sure, but it has worked out. Thank you.
All right. So just so people can know you, how did you start out? I'm sure you just didn't arrive on TV and doing all these things. So where did it all start?
Well, I like to start out a little personal and just let people know a little bit about me and kind of connect. But I'm a simple man of faith. I married my high school sweetheart in 1977. And so we just recently celebrated 50 years of the first day we met, which was,
Congratulations. That's
thank you, which
huge.
was really nice and exciting. Um, and then we have two children and six grandchildren. And 2 years ago, we built a multi-generational house. So our daughter, husband, and four kids live on one side, and my wife and I on the other. And our son has two older children who are all on their own, but they all live very close to where we are. So usually a family dinner can be a quite large number of people.
Mhm. It sounds like fun. Yeah.
Yes. So that's a little bit of me personally. And how did I get started? Like most careers, it evolves. It evolves over time, and depending upon where you are and the opportunities that you see. And so for me, it was just a matter of working with people. I enjoy working with people, and so the leadership aspect tends to work out pretty well. Uh, I have worked for small companies. I've worked for medium size. I've worked for multi-billion dollar companies. I've had upwards of 450 people reporting into a structure for me. So really getting that exposure of dealing with individuals has always been, top of mind. And my PhD is in global leadership and entrepreneurship, and my dissertation was in group dynamics with an emphasis on cohesion. And when I decided what I wanted to do for the second half of my life, I said, oh, let me spend some more time consulting and helping organizations. And let's talk about retaining talent because that's really important to organizations. So I built a business all around cohesion culture. And we launched the book in 2019. It was a bestseller. And since then, we've launched several others. And here we are today, now talking to people around the globe, helping them understand what it's like to retain the talent in their organizations by helping them infuse cohesion into their cultures.
Cool. So that's what you mean by cohesion culture.
So the cohesion culture is those three strategic elements that that you first mentioned in the reading the bio. It's belonging, which deals with inclusion, value, which is meaningful work, and shared mutual commitments, which is collaboration. And it's really helping organizations really focus. And by giving them this strategic framework, it allows them to place that over top of the organization and see areas where they might need to improve or they do something different. And it's really helping them understand what those three principles are, those three strategic elements, and how those elements interact with things like transformative leadership and what that principle is like. So there's a lot of work. We do some assessments, we do coaching, and all of that falls into the program. So it's really a lot of fun.
It sounds like it. And actually, last week I finished a train the trainer where we're teaching other people. And we went over just a really short piece on group dynamics and how at first, you bring people in and they're kind of like, they're not sure about what's going on, they're not sure if they want to be there. They don't, the trust is really low. And then they kind of start to gel. But as they gel, sometimes there's a storm where where some things might fall apart, but then after the falling apart, somehow that's when the cohesion happens. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
It's
I am.
very
So that's,
interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's Tuckman's theory of the four stages of group dynamics. But here's the interesting part is that cohesion can be present in all stages of a group's life cycle. And when cohesion is present, you get performance every single time. So there's a few things, and I would just love to take an opportunity to share some things with you if we could do that.
That would be great.
Okay, good. So let's just really understand this concept of belonging, what that really means. So belonging is about creating inclusion. So it's not belonging by itself, but has to have inclusion to complete the cycle. Without that, then it's just really kind of maybe like I feel like I might be a part of something, but I don't know for sure.
Mhm.
So one of the ways that we kind of really make a connection, especially for businesses to understand that, is we're going to talk about throwing a party. So, so Dr. Kimberly, you're going to throw a party. All right. So you didn't even know that, but you're going to throw a party. So it's going to be great.
Mm.
Everyone gets an invitation. Everyone listening gets an invitation to your party.
Okay.
All right. So you kind of feel like you belong. So you
Mhm.
feel like, oh, this is really kind of nice. I got an invitation. It's kind of special. Now, from an organizational perspective, that's the offer letter. So the employee's got an offer letter. So now the employee is kind of like going, oh, I feel like I belong to the company. Oh, isn't this great? So
Mhm.
when you come to your party and the doorbell rings, what are some things that you do?
Well, you greet people for one thing.
Right. You greet them. You might say hello. You might give them a kiss on the cheek. You might hug them. You might shake their hand, just depending upon how well you know them. And then you'd show them around. You tell them where the food is. You would let them know about dancing. And so, we'd be doing some dancing, kind of be sharing a little bit of that. And for people who are kind of like watching this, they might see me doing some little dance moves. I do some little finger dance moves. And of course, if my daughter was here, she would say, Dad, stop doing that. And I would say, well, honey, why would I stop doing this? And she says, because you're embarrassing me. And I would say, great, my work here is done. So with that, but this whole idea behind the party is I now feel included because I now know things. Well, think about your employee on the first day. If your onboarding experience is filled with paperwork, and it's not filled with connecting the individual to other individuals and to the organization, you miss an important opportunity of creating inclusion. So that's just one simple way that you can take just one little aspect and apply it immediately to the work environment. Value is about meaningful work. It's about having purpose. And for most people, they want to know that the work they do matters, like it makes a difference. They wouldn't normally just do work for the sake of doing it. Now, I do understand that there are some people who work because they need to make money. Most of us, if not all of us, work to make money, but some of us are fortunate enough to do jobs that create value for us, like we've been able to select something. So we're talking about those individuals. We know there's an anomaly, a certain group of people who simply work and don't really care much about it. But for the most part, in leadership, we're always focusing on that positive aspect and those individuals being engaged in what we're doing. So we have this valuable work that we're doing. And what also helps instill value is for people to know what happens to the work before it comes to them and when it leaves, where it goes and who's going to deal with it and what's going to happen. That all helps us create value or meaningful work. And then the last thing we look for in these shared mutual commitments, we look for the opportunity to collaborate. And when we collaborate, we need two things. We need to have need. That means the individuals all agree they need each other. If you don't have that, you're not going to get the full impact of cohesion. So everyone who's working on a project, working together in this little team, they have to agree they need each other. The second thing is they have to trust that people will do their jobs, that they will do what they were expected to do based on their skills and what they bring to the table. When you have that, now you have cohesion. And what the research was able to prove, the hypothesis I proved, was that cohesion positively impacts performance in all stages of a group's life cycle. So whether the group is just actually forming, storming, norming, or performing, and cohesion is present, then people perform every single time. And what really makes this exciting for businesses is that you get to stop worrying about making people happy or satisfied if you want engaged employees. If you want an engaged employee, build cohesion into your culture, because the type of performance you get comes from engaged employees who are helpful, who are active, who are vested, and who are eager.
Mhm. And that makes total sense to me. Several years ago, I was working in kind of a more of a country um, type uh, place as a doctor. Um, so people were a little more laid back or whatever. But there was this one place where they were making these big canisters that they would fill with gases and stuff. And I saw several employees from that particular company. And when you ask them, what do you do? They go into detail about what they do and how they fit in and how amazing their company is and what they're doing for the world. I mean, every one of them that came in, and there was probably 5 of them, same experience every time I asked them that from the same company. So that company did a really good job of making people feel included and belonging and important.
Yes, and that's just the basics, and it didn't cost anything. Like so far, everything I've talked about hasn't cost one penny. And so when I consult and work with organizations, we try to build on things that they already have. We don't come in as a consulting firm and try to, make recommendations for new software, new systems that cost thousands of dollars. We like to leverage what you already have. And for the most part, people already have a lot of stuff. They just haven't brought it together. They haven't figured out how to use it, how to make it, really more effective for them.
Mhm. So, how do you get everyone excited to be part of that team?
You mean the team at the organization or the team or the Cohesion Culture crew?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I don't know. What's the distinction there? Why don't you tell me about that?
So our Cohesion Culture crew is a group of 5 individuals. We're all separate business owners, and we focus on areas of HR, talent development, team building and team bonding, those types of activities. So it gets them all excited when they think about the fact that they're going to be able to impact the individuals within an organization. And how we get people excited inside of an organization is we begin to create structure and processes that really focus on how you treat people. So the Cohesion Culture program is extremely successful when the leaders adopt a mindset that says, I will focus on the needs of others first and then self. It's not a martyrism, it's transformational leadership. And it's about serving as really a servant to individuals. So it's thinking of others first and putting their needs before your own. And that fundamentally sets it up. That also works really nice for the current employment situation, definitely here in the US and for a number of countries that I work with. That whole concept and that whole idea, there's no people don't have a problem with that because they understand that's really the nature, that's the way business is. Maybe 30 years ago, the business wasn't like that, but that's what it is today. And what we do different about our programs, it really excites the employees, since your question was about exciting the employees, is we offer programs that are that are so different than what they would normally experience. There are no trust falls, there are no rope courses, and there is no death by PowerPoint. So it is all hands-on interactive activities. So we're trying to use an activity to help us with a leadership principle or theory or philosophy that we want to ground them in. And then through the debriefing, they understand, oh, this is how I would apply it, so that they can experience today and implement tomorrow. And our folks who take our leadership programs, that's the one thing, the comment that always comes back is how different they are from other training programs. They're not, sitting in a desk and people are lecturing to them. So we do provide, critical information, but they get a chance to really think about it. We ask a lot of open-ended, non-leading questions to encourage self-discovery, where the individuals are now applying in the moment this whatever the situation is with the activity that we're doing, they're actually starting to make sense of it. So it's part of my background. I am what I would consider myself as a metaphorical teacher, and that is I like to speak in metaphors, analogies. I like using acronyms for process because it helps people remember and relate to what you're talking about.
That's for sure. So when you come in and work with like a company, are you coming in for like a certain amount of time, or like are they like taking a week off and doing learning all these processes, or you're just coming in and doing one here and there? How does that work?
Well, that's really a great question, and a lot of it depends on what the individual company wants to get out of it. But we have a five-step process of engagement that we sort of talk to the client about to see where are they in the whole full spectrum. We start out with a culture discovery, so we need to understand more about their internal culture. We want to understand things like, well, what are their core values and how have they built the core values? How do they use them? How do they coach to them? Um, what are the stories, the rituals and traditions that they have in the organization? So we really kind of understand the things that they celebrate, what's important to them, and to know that. Then we move into an assessment phase, and we've got several opportunities for assessments. We like to do a benchmark of the organization, the cultural assessment before we start then with any training programs. We work with a plan. We help them create a plan based on the information that comes from the assessment and from the culture discovery. And that plan helps them to determine where they need to address and deal with different things. Then we move into education, and then finally sustainability. And for most of my clients, the engagement process starts with after we have some initial meetings, and most of them are done via electronic, either through Zoom, Teams, or a Skype for Business, depending upon what works for the company. So we have those kind of conversations. We always make sure the CEO is on board. Then we meet with the executive team in the morning, and then we meet with an expanded group of the senior team and some other VPs or key leaders within the organization in the afternoon. And then from there, we then work on culture, on their core values or their guiding principles or shared values, and we make sure that those are really good and in place. And if not, then we create an engagement for that. And then we focus on coaching. So we coach with the CEO and the executive team first and make sure that they really have a lot of philosophies down good, that they're thinking in the same way that we are. And they've got some little activities. They do a leadership assessment. We help them build out a leader action plan that kind of is more personal for them. And then from there, then we build into the major plan, and then we start offering the education and figuring out what's the correct path for the sessions. We don't like to start out with education right from the beginning because we need foundation. If you think about it and you wanted to build a neighborhood, you wouldn't just start erecting houses. You would make sure that there was ground and the ground was cleared. You'd ensure that there was utilities put in, that there was a road that was there. Because if not, if you don't have that infrastructure, then you're just kind of building things and who knows what's going to happen. We do have some clients that only need us for a one-off. They already have a very strong culture program. They already have things that are there. They want us to help infuse a little bit more of the cohesion. So we will do some one-off sessions, and those sessions are designed for executives, for VP levels, for supervisors, and for what we call individual contributors.
Mhm. So when you have larger companies, so you're training obviously the people who are in the higher management type areas. How do you get it to trickle down to the guy who's working in the factory and he's just putting the shoe on the thing, the squirting the thing on the sole, and then the next one comes around, he's taking it off and how do you get it down to the guy who's doing the simplest thing?
We teach each level to coach to the next level. So depending upon the levels in the organization, it's about creating those conversations around what we hope is what is continuous coaching. So they're always thinking about, and it's not just coaching on, hey, you didn't put the sole on correctly, hey, you didn't put the glue on. That's performance sort of conversations. But what we're talking about is the development. What commitment are you making for development for individuals? If you will never take those individuals off the line of them putting the shoe together based on your example, then it's never going to trickle down. The trickling down starts from the top down. So we kind of build programs from the top down, the bottom up, and meet somewhere in the middle. But we got to get the top right first because they are the ones who sign off on the programs. They put the money in the budget to make sure that things like this happen. It's their philosophies that others will imitate. We learn social learning occurs in 3 stages, and most people will observe their leader, what those leaders' observations are. They then do an imitation assessment to decide, should I be modeling what they're doing or not? And then the last part is then they finally implement what they have decided. And that's really how we experience social learning. And if we build it from the top down, then we get observations, imitation, implementation available at all levels. And we don't just simply start with the middle managers. We don't start with the supervisors because when the supervisors have questions and they go back to the executive team and the executive team has no idea what you're talking about, then it doesn't support the program.
Mhm.
And if we don't get the senior buy-in, then we don't do an engagement with the company because we know it won't work. And so there's no point in us taking people's money. We're not in the business of taking people's money. We're in the business of changing people's lives.
Yeah. So I know that you're working on the cohesion piece, but when you think about business, isn't it just numbers? Like, hey, we have to get these numbers. So how do you balance that? I think of it as kindness, inclusion, feeling, like you're a part of something, and still the boundary of we still have to have these numbers, even though we're getting along and we're happy and everybody's happy working. How do you balance that? Okay, we got to get our numbers and we got to work together.
So strategically, I have done a little modification or just did a little variety here with the balanced scorecard. So it is a Harvard Business uh, project, and the organizations have 4 primary areas that they focus on that creates a balance inside the company. And so I've taken that and kind of evolved it a little bit to say, here are 5 of the things that you should be focusing on. So one of them is financial. So you have to make sure that you've got good financial stability in the company, because if not, then there's no future for the organization. We
Mm.
focus on their revenue streams and their expenses and what that may look like. So we don't necessarily consult with them on it. We make sure they have goals set up around it. So they are setting up goals. If they don't, then we try to encourage them to make sure that they do. The second one is what would be their consumer satisfaction surveys. It's how are they connecting with the consumer? What does that look like? Do they have a net promoter score, an NPS, where they are evaluating whether individuals will make recommendations to other people for that particular company's products or services? Then we look at the next category, which is business efficiencies or business processes. And sometimes this is where you might think about new software. You might think about, something a new product that you might offer. Maybe just improving the experience with the consumer so there's less friction. So again, we've got the financial goal, we've got the what we call the consumer, feedback goal. We then look at the business processes. Now, those are 3 of the 4 that come with the balanced scorecard through Harvard. Their fourth one is what they call training and development. Well, I've said it has to be more than training and development, it's culture. It has to be culture has to be on par with all those other items. If not, then you've made culture secondary. And training and development is important, but it's a part of culture. So you have to expand the conversation to include more than that. And then the last element that I've added is growth, because it helps when organizations think about growth, not just their revenue streams and expenses, but the growth can be a really important metric that they set that all people in the organization can play for. And that could be production. So it could be a production goal. If it's financial services industry, then it may be their loan goal that they have. So it's a production loan goal, whether they're doing auto loans, mortgages, that. If you were an investment firm, it might be the dollars under the assets that you manage. So that becomes a goal, and people can keep track of how many new that you've added. If it's manufacturing plant, it could be something based on the number of days for growth that you produce the widgets, you produce the items that you want, and what that looks like. And I've also had some folks think about growth in the terms of safety, meaning that they will grow if they're safe, if they have a safe environment where they're protecting the employees, then the production naturally happens and there's no breakdown in the production. So there's lots of little ways to do the growth. So although we can provide some strategic planning for an organization, most of our work is around culture, but we do have an understanding of those areas that need to be in place. And then we help them elevate culture in 4 ways. So any of the individuals who are listening and or watching, depending upon where this may show up in some sort of social media, there are 4 things to help make culture a strategy that is on par with the rest of the strategies. And how I came up with this was Peter Drucker is typically credited with the saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I started thinking about that. I go, like, really? Do we just want culture to worry about eating breakfast? Are we going to pay no attention to culture and just let it do whatever it wants to do? I'm like, no, let's elevate culture to an area. So if we make culture a strategy, it will find something else to eat. And so we level it. So the first thing that has to happen is there has to be very specific monetary considerations for culture within the organization that goes just beyond payroll and benefits, but actually extends into that area of training development, things like DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, those types of items. So they just need to really make sure they've got some robust programs. They put some money in the budget to make sure they're taking care of culture and what that looks like. Then they have to advocate the employee voice at the senior leadership table. If HR does not sit at the senior leadership table, they need to rethink that. Sometimes they will allow HR to be a subset of something else, but the person who's running the HR function is only getting a watered down version of what's happening at the senior leadership table from the individual that reports to him. And now I'm not dissing those individuals because they may be quite qualified in providing the information and very succinct. However, nothing replaces an individual who is part of a critical conversation because they get the nuances, they get all the flavor. Sometimes when we convey information from one person to the next, we become very succinct. We leave out details, we leave out things that we think doesn't matter, but really makes a difference in the whole experience that the individual has. From there, we then need to keep this focus of culture on par with strategy in the same way that we think of when we do a market expansion. There's a strategy to expand market, to offer new products and services into a market. That's very specific strategy that we have. We might have a corporate communication strategy. We might have strategies to help us manage our balance sheet. And so our asset liability management strategies that we would put in place. So culture has to be that. Culture cannot be thought of as just a string of tacticals that somehow are said around the same time. They have to integrate. They have to they have to make sense. You have to understand why you're putting something in place from a cultural perspective. Otherwise, you won't be able to truly integrate or interface the culture into the organization, into all areas of it, because the organization will be so focused on those other strategies, they forget about culture. And then the last part is really educating all levels of the organization to really get the culture of the company, the core values, and make sure they're living out the core values, coaching to the core values, training programs that support the core values. All that comes through education. So those are my recommendations to an organization that wants to make culture a strategy, so it will find something else to eat.
All right. So I'm just curious about this. Being Americans, we bootstrap ourselves up. And I think of sometimes when people are putting together a company, even they're just like putting it together. And then somehow, some way, all of a sudden it starts exploding and they need to scale and they're like just trying to scale. And and where is the culture there? They were just trying to make the business go. Have you ever walked into businesses like that where there's just no culture? They're just kind of trying to take care of things
Well,
as they come up?
well, it's interesting that you say that, but the reality is they have a culture. Their culture is seat of the pants culture. So they actually have one, and they've trained people on that particular culture, and they've created stories, rituals, customs, and traditions around it. So literally, there isn't a business that I go into that doesn't have a culture unless they are building it from the ground up. I have done some incubator projects. I've done some pro bono for some organizations where they are beginning a new startup. So here in our local area, there was an IT firm that was going to do a startup, and I worked with one of the colleges and universities, and so it became an opportunity to kind of work with them to begin focusing on what they want that culture to look like. What do they want those core values or guiding principles or shared values to look like? And how do they want people to behave? And what would that look like? And so what were some management philosophies and practices that they'd want to put in place and make sure that people knew about? So it was just really creating foundation. So I've done that work. But most of the work I do is with organizations that have a pretty good handle on their culture, and they understand, because they're already spending money on it, they understand that what I can do is help them level it up even more.
Mhm,
And so that's when I get an opportunity to come in and then bring the rest of the Cohesion Culture crew with me.
mhm. And just thinking about the individuals in those organizations, whether they be at the top level or, doing more of I call it the legwork. A lot of times the people down below, they are doing a lot more of the legwork. What are the individual benefits for them? What are things that make their life better or makes them want to stay or um something where they'll go home and say to their husband or wife, "You know what? I just love working here because."
Right. Well, the first thing is because again, we talked a little bit about the fact that people get to, they work for money. They're making some money, whether they have purpose or meaning or not, but generally they do. Um, so the money part has to be right. So the HR team has to have a good um, salary administration program in place. So we get that out of the way.
Mhm,
Otherwise, money becomes like a little bit of an issue. So that you have to solve that. So if you're paying fairly in the marketplace, then the rest of the things I talk about will now make sense. So what you have to do is appeal to the person's intrinsic values. It's what's on the inside. It's not always the status of, hey, I got a new title, I get a new office, I get new equipment, um, I get to go to a training program that nobody else got to go to. Those items are good and there's value to them there, but they're extrinsic and they have a very short fuse, a very short timeline. Generally for pay, you get an increase in pay. You get excited when you see those numbers for the first time. And then in 2 weeks, when you see those numbers again, they're the numbers that you saw 2 weeks ago. You're not as excited as you were the first time you saw them. So, so that's why it has a very short period. You get a title, you get a position, you might be like, yeah, really kind of feeling really good, moving around, like, yeah, I got that title. And then you realize all the things that come with it. The title doesn't quite seem like it was so, it wasn't quite romantic as you thought it was, and the reality sets in, and, just life changes. So that's why we focus on the intrinsic values inside the person. There is a Harvard Business article called The Power of Small Wins, and it will help explain what is called the progress loop, how you have to feed that. So you have to feed that intrinsic value. For those individuals who go home and when they're asked about work, love the work that they're doing, they have really found that their purpose ignites their passion. So their passion because they're doing some purpose and value and meaningful work. So you want that to happen. So part of the connection is ensuring that people have meaningful work that they're doing and that work is respected and the work matters, and executives within the team spend time letting people know that what they're doing matters or makes sense. We go back to the shoe analogy, and in the shoe manufacturing plant, does leaders ever come by and tell somebody, nice job? Without that, then you don't feel quite like it's working, it's gelling the way you want it to. So we offer a couple of techniques that the individuals can employ when they have the foundation. So again, this will not work if you just say, hey, I'm going to write this down and tomorrow I'm going to go try it. It may not have the same impact for you unless you've built the infrastructure. So one of them is what we call a cohesion huddle. And so a cohesion huddle is a 2 to 3 minute gathering. So Dr. Kimberly, can you say with me 2 to 3 minutes?
2 to 3 minutes.
Okay, good. I need to make sure people were hearing 2 to 3 minutes because some organizations have huddles that last for half an hour to an hour. And they use a huddle to talk about the work that needs to be done and what goals you're going to have for the day. That's fine. I am not telling you not to have that. What I'm saying is start with the cohesion huddle, which is how long?
2 to 3 minutes.
Oh, 2 to 3 minutes, right. So if you can't invest 2 to 3 minutes in your team, then you might want to rethink what you're investing in. And those 2 to 3 minutes is about setting the tone for the day. It's almost like the locker room message that happens in a game before they go out on field, or it's the pumping up that the quarterback does, or the individuals when they are grouping themselves together and thinking about the play that's happening next, or you've seen sometimes where soccer players will interlock arms and they dance to the left, they dance to the right, and they've got some little thing that they're saying. That's a huddle. That's a cohesion huddle. They are setting the tone. So we suggest that you can do things by talking about people's recognitions and achievements, because achievement is a very important motivator. What have you done that can be celebrated, and letting others celebrate each other within that 2 to 3 minutes. Maybe we celebrate an individual's birthday or some work activity. Maybe we have a poem, or we've got some sort of quote that we use to kind of get people really jazzed up for the day. That is a cohesion huddle. We recommend that you do it every day because it is only 2 to 3 minutes. So they can do it every day. It's not a big hassle of bringing people together for it. Although I've got clients who will do it a varying number of days. I have one that does it on Fridays only, and they extend it for about 5 minutes. And it's a financial institution, and they have people dancing in the lobby area because they play music. And so they like that. They want people all jazzed up to the point that the individual consumers who were looking through the glass door wondered when the doors were open, why they stopped the music, why they weren't dancing anymore. So what they decided to do was they decided to let the people dance with them. So they carried the dancing a little bit longer after they opened the doors for another 2 to 3 minutes. Those people who were there get to be engaged in the dancing, get to be a part of it. And it was a marvelous example of extending the culture outside the four walls by letting the individual consumers participate in that. And it just really created a great environment, a great example of how you can do something so simple. Notice that there is no money spent in this huddle, in you, and everything that I recommended. No money spent in that. No money spent, no extra money except, well, maybe the CD player or whatever you're using, but now you might have a Bose speaker and attach it to your internet. So whatever those musical opportunities are, maybe there might be a little money there, but hey, those aren't big dollars.
Mhm.
And so that's the cohesion huddle. And then we also recommend doing a retention debrief. Now, the retention debrief works differently. This one I don't back down on. It is every single day and it's individual, it's one-on-one.
Mhm.
Where the huddle was a group coming together,
Mhm.
the debrief is a one-on-one. And what you want is for the individual employee to be accountable for having to provide the debrief, not the leader.
Wow.
And what they do is the leader sets up the program and designs maybe one or two words to help kind of say, this is what my day might be like. My day was really awesome, or my day wasn't so great, or it was somewhere in between. Or they can do a rating scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10. And the individual, and what we train is that you would set this up so that somewhere within an hour of the individual leaving, they tell you how their day was going. We recommend that because we don't want people thinking that the only reason that you want to know how things are going is to determine whether I'm still at work or not.
Mhm.
So we want to give people an opportunity to really have that freedom, but to be close to the end of the day. The main reason for that is research tells us that how a person feels at the end of the day is more likely how they'll start the next day. So now we've got some information at our fingertips. We got a way to know whether they're going to go home and tell people, this is the best place I've ever worked, or they're going to go home and say, this place stinks, this doesn't work. And the leader has to really put on some, leadership smarts. They have to do some discernment about information. If they're getting fives from individuals every single day, then part of their extended debrief would be to ask the person, hey, you've been giving me fives for the last 2 weeks. Tell me what makes a five. What makes the day work that it's a five for you?
Mhm.
And then now they've got to provide context to it. If the individual tells you at the end of the day it's a 1 or 2, then you have an opportunity. You either can address it before they leave. Remember, they told you about an hour before they leave, so it gives you plenty of time to think about doing it. Or you can address it the first thing in the morning before things start. But we do recommend that you really address any of those negative sort of feedbacks that you get from the individual. Now, the good news is you're not going to get groupthink because you know what happens if you've got a group of 4 or 5 people together and you ask them how things are going. What do they say?
They always say the same thing.
They say the same thing. They go, oh, it's great. Yeah, things are good. I'm fine. But you want to know the real answer. So you want to know the real answer, you got to talk to the real people and you've got to allow them to do it. And so how do you manage that? Oh my gosh, like what would you do? If you have an internal communication system and instant messaging system inside the company, you can let them use that. If you're comfortable giving them your cell phone number, then they actually text you the number or text you the information. Maybe you are okay if they send an email to you and tell you what that is. Or they might stop by the office and give you some information before they leave, however that works out. So the leader gets a chance to figure out what the rating scale is. They put the responsibility on each of the employees, and they determine how that communication is going to come to them. The one thing that we highly also recommend is that if the employee does not provide the feedback, that the manager has to check with them the very next day and make sure that they understand they're accountable for that feedback until they build the habits and build the patterns. I've had some leaders have the feedback come on post-it notes. So that's another example. So this is when they've had individuals who are all working at the office. They have a post-it note. So they get the post-it note in the morning and they
Uh-huh.
know they have to turn the post note in at the end of the day. So again, and what we do is try to help people figure out things that work for them. We're creative. People are sometimes more creative than they give themselves credit. We just ask the right questions, and before you know it, they've come up with the things to do. So did that address the question that you asked, those
Oh,
examples?
it really did and more. And what I like about that is that people feel heard because I've worked in companies where you have suggestions for the people in the C-suite. They have no idea what's happening in the different locations, and the people in locations know what's happening, and they have really great ideas that could make the business better, but the people in the C-suite, they don't even want to hear any suggestions. So, by actually asking people how they're doing, it would stop people from being disgruntled or unhappy. And if they
Exactly.
had good ideas, that would be a time where they could share their great ideas that could help everyone.
So the idea also is that it works throughout the whole organization. So it's not just your low-level supervisors that are asking the individual contributors. The supervisor has to provide the information back up the chain, so it eventually gets all the way up the chain. The other thing that we also do, you talked on something that I think is really helpful, and that is understanding what individuals are doing with what we refer to as boots on the ground. So this is the boots on the ground. We're doing the work. People in the ivory tower, they have no idea. So we institute a program called A Day in the Life. And so I do have to give credit to the fact that, and I'm not sure whether they still do it or not, but I had some experience with Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A has the training program at one time where every individual who worked a non-sales job had to work 1 day a year in one of their food outlets. So they had to go to one of the franchisees, and then they had to serve food for the day, clean the tables, do the restroom, whatever it is that needed to be done that day, so that they would never lose touch with what the individual employees were going through. So we do a modified version of that called A Day in the Life. We don't expect to, certainly in financial institutions, for people to come down and run teller windows, but we develop a 2-hour curriculum that the individuals will do on a day in the life. This is very helpful for senior leaders because most time, if you just give senior leaders or managers an opportunity, they'll go in and they might ask how things are going, and they ask everybody, and then what are people going to say because they do that. So we try to make sure that there's a little different approach that they take, and those days in the life have to be customed for each individual company. The idea is for them to observe, to
Mhm.
determine what they will assess to imitate, and then what needs to be implemented. So they're really focusing on it. We give them things like conversation starters so that it's not just hello, how are you, which is a nice thing. It's fine. It's not a problem. But for the most part, when people say, how are you, they really aren't interested. And when you talked about being heard before, it needs to have a different kind of tone and conversation. And some of this came as a result. I had the opportunity to work and meet with the leaders at Prague, in Prague at Duke Manufacturing. We met with the leaders there, and we were asking them, like, what are some of the things that make the connection between your employees and the company work? Because they had such a high expression from their surveys. I mean, lots of high scores, very little turnover. And what we heard was that the leadership took an interest in the individual, that they made a connection with the individual. And it wasn't just about knowing how many dogs they had, or whether they celebrated a birthday, or the number of children, or how long they've been with their significant other. It wasn't those types of things. They also made connections. So in addition to that, but what was the real distinction is that the leadership would ask them, okay, so what can I do different? What do you want me to do differently? What do you want leadership to do that they're not doing? What do you want the company to do that it's not doing? What do you see that we're not taking advantage of? What are you observing? What are you hearing? And really getting all that solicited feedback was the thing that really worked. And it led us to the understanding that inclusion was a really important part, that what they were doing was they were asking what makes you feel included at work by all of these questions. And so we've modified, and so part of our program in doing this is to have the key question is to ask, what makes you feel included at work? We know that the number one reason that people leave an organization, in addition to a life change, is the relationship with the supervisor. If it's a good one, they stay. If it's a bad one, they leave.
Yes.
And again, this is also assuming that money is handled, that money is not an issue. And I can speak very firmly on that, and I will in a moment, as to what I mean by the money part. But they really want to make sure that they know why they're included. how they feel included, then they need to act on that. And when they do, then you actually solidify that piece of belonging. And then it trickles into their meaningful work, that trickles into their collaboration. The next thing you know, you've got all three items. Now, can you have people who belong, but they're not cohesive? Likely no. Especially if they have that inclusion, because the other pieces naturally fall into place. Um, can you have a person who says, I really love my job, but they hate where they're working? The likelihood is that's not good for the culture. So it's really not cohesive. It's not the same thing. You have to fire on all cylinders. You have to fire on all those. So let me go back for a moment and tell you about the money piece and why I've said once you get the money solved, then it's not an issue. So MIT Sloan survey did a year ago or so. They interviewed I don't millions of online profiles of individuals who left one job for the next.
Mhm.
And they cited the reasons that people left. Do you want to guess out of 25 items listed on their sheet, where do you think money fell?
Well, I would think in the top five.
Money was number 16.
Hmm.
Money does not always motivate people to leave. However, let's just put this in perspective. When people leave a company, they always tell you it's more money.
Hmm.
So the story that you believe is not always the story you get.
Hmm.
So when you ask them online and it's anonymous, they'll tell you the real reason. But face value, we might say more money because we want people, even if we don't like the organization, if we don't like the organization, we might say, well, we got more money and we also have a better culture. But if you're leaving a place where you have been successful and things are going well, then you want to say more money because people will say, well, you're crazy for leaving, unless it would be for more money. And so sometimes it's distorted, and that's what we believe. And that's why we want to make sure that our leaders go back to grounded information to get their answers as to why people are doing things, as opposed to just thinking that's what it is or relying on some words that they've heard.
Yeah. Wow, I'm learning so much from you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm happy to share the information. And thank you for asking the questions, which is giving me a chance to speak to this.
Yeah. So if people wanted to work with you or companies wanted to work with you, how do they get a hold of you? Where do they find your books? This is the part where you tell people, how do they connect?
So they can find the books on Amazon. And so this is Cohesion Culture, Proven Principles to Retain Your Top Talent. And they can connect with me at drtroyhall.com. So it's just 10 little letters, drtroyhall, and then the .com. So that would be 13. Which of course is Taylor Swift's favorite number. So I should probably say that. And then maybe those people who are Swifties out there will go like, oh, this is a good thing because it's 13's in the number. But um, but anyway, it's drtroyhall.com. And then there's an opportunity to connect with me. There's also an opportunity to schedule a call if you'd like, so that if you'd like to have a consulting call, you want to gain some more information, insight, and you prefer to do that, then just fill out a form. Then you can make the connection there and you have full access to me.
Great. Thank you. So now I have
Yeah.
a personal question for you.
Okay.
What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
My faith and my family. Yeah, so those bring great joy to me, and to really to find things connected. Just to kind of to give you just a little bit more on that, we had a. I told you before that we celebrated 50 years of our relationship with my wife from the first day we met, and so we took a what we called our 50-year first look anniversary trip, and we said, okay, where haven't we gone that we could go? Well, we hadn't been to South America, so I set up a little surprise. She didn't know in the beginning that we were going to do it. She knew the 50 year was coming up and something would happen, but she didn't know. So I set up this idea like, we'll go to South America. And so we ended up going to Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. And in Brazil, it was about me seeing Christ the Redeemer, the statue. I really wanted to see it. I've
Okay.
seen it in so many movies and travel pictures, and I thought, man, this will be great. Well, the trip was great weather until we get to Rio. And Rio, it is cloudy, it is rainy, it is just overcast like crazy. We were there 3 days before Easter, 3 or 4 days before Easter. And so when we eventually got to go to Christ the Redeemer to see it, it was covered with clouds.
Oh.
And although we could get an image of it because it's such a massive structure, it's 98 feet tall plus the pedestal, and then it's 92 feet wide with the arms spread out. So that massive structure, even in the clouds, when we were there on the mountain where it's located, and we took our selfie picture, we saw the statue. And I had a little bit of a pity party. I have to tell you that when we were going there and it was raining, I was like having a pity party because I wanted to see this beautiful picture. I wanted to see to the down into the beach area, all of that.
Mhm.
Well, guess what? That didn't happen. And uh, it, but I decided that that experience was designed just for me. And so that was my experience.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for all your wisdom. It's been
You're
really
welcome.
awesome.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So I have one last question before we complete.
Okay, go ahead.
What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
Um, the first thing is say so. Our words create the life that we live. It creates our environment. So say so.
Mhm.
Say it's incredible. Watch the limiting and the negative language that sometimes feeds into our everyday life. Really have that. Take rest for yourself. Make sure that you are relaxing. Make sure that you are taking care of yourself from a health perspective. And then find someone that you love and share things with them.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Choi.
You're welcome. I'm so happy. Thank you, Dr. Kimberly, for having me on board. And what I would like to say to folks as we close out is you don't have to know everything. You just need to be teachable.
Beautiful. We'll talk to you again soon, Dr. Choi.
All right. Thank you.